Hi, hello, Izabela Kozakiewicz. We welcome you from Gdańsk, Infoshare, and my guest, Aman Ghei from FINCH Capital. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Aman, you came to visit Infoshare and to observe what is going on here. You invest from FINCH Capital, you invest quite often in CEE. How you perceive the CEE market from different sectors? How startups and new companies are developing?
Yes, it's very interesting. We've now been coming to the CEE, specifically Poland, for the last 5 years, and have seen a major change actually in the investment climate and the quality of companies coming through. I think the PFR program, for instance, has enabled a lot of smaller early stage companies to get funding and actually build interesting products. And so you're seeing really a big breakthrough of companies. What's really interesting about the CEE that maybe the rest of the West of Europe doesn't have is engineering talent. I think that's really been kind of the core focus for a lot of companies. And so whether it's the Revoluts of the world that are setting up engineering bases here, and you're starting to see people come out of those companies and build their own companies. So, the ecosystem takes time to foster, it takes time, and so we have to be a little bit patient. But there's been a very positive change, I think, and you can see kind of what's going around here. This is, from a magnitude perspective, very, very big.
And from the perspective of the macroeconomic crisis, because that's crisis, I mean, of course, obviously, and from the geopolitical perspective, how you assess the upcoming future up to 5 years as for CEE and particularly Poland?
Yeah. I think as European investors, we're less concerned about the geopolitical situation, to be honest. Maybe people locally are more concerned. I can understand why, but I think as European investors, we believe in the CEE and the European Union and have faith maybe in that kind of geopolitical situation. So it doesn't come up too much in our investment committees, to give you a sense, the geopolitical kind of situation. I think on a more macroeconomical situation, obviously the market is undergoing some interesting shifts. What's interesting is there's just still a lot of capital to be deployed into companies. And maybe what needs to change is the valuation shifts. And it takes time to align with founders and people who've started businesses, as well as people who've invested in those businesses. Their expectations maybe last year were based on what the market was, and that has dramatically fallen. And so there needs to be a little bit of a kind of readjustment of alignment. It's happened in the UK, for instance. We spend a lot of time in the UK, so it's happened already there. We're starting to see it happen here. It's not quite happened here yet, but I think eventually once that sorts itself out, I think we'll be fine. I'm not too worried about it.
You say about the valuation adjustment. Does the crisis will impact anyhow the sector choice from the investor's perspective?
Yes, I think people will be focused on more capital efficient businesses, and what I mean by that is how do you think about hiring people? Growth at some point was kind of given priority. I think now priority will be on how can you build an interesting business in the most capital efficient manner. And so not so much sector, but I think there are certain sectors that maybe require more capital to fund. So take the grocery delivery space or the mobility space, e-scooters. These sectors require a lot of capital, and you'll see those sectors being put under more scrutiny. But I think if you look at software businesses, for instance, they tend to be a little bit more capital efficient than consumer businesses. So I think you're generally seeing a flock towards a little bit more B2B software businesses as opposed to the consumer market.
And last but not least, how do you perceive the whole metaverse and the blockchain sectors? I mean, here specifically, we hear a lot about what is going on. The biggest or one of the biggest Polish banks, PKO, just presented their brand new metaverse project. How do you perceive this sector?
I used to work at Facebook, and maybe this was 6-7 years back. No one really spoke about the metaverse at that time. So, in my view, a little bit, it's still early, and I think kind of companies are trying to figure out this new reality, maybe that could be laid. Kind of separating that from maybe the blockchain side of things. I think in blockchain cryptocurrencies, we're seeing this shift towards more infrastructure type of companies. Take in Poland a very interesting business called Ramp. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
one of the biggest.
Biggest. Yeah. But they're not so much in the cryptocurrency market, but more the enabling infrastructure. And I think that is very interesting. That is getting to the root of how cryptocurrency is exchanged, the payment rails, the networks. And those are very interesting businesses to back. So I think that will be an evolution in kind of blockchain cryptocurrency, and then just back onto the metaverse. I think people jump on these trends quite quickly, and I think in the investor universe, I think we're kind of cautious and trying to maybe take a step back a little bit and understand how long before this is something that is really interesting for us to look at, invest at, and so maybe the early stage funds are a little bit more leaning forward to it. And as growth investors, we're probably taking a little bit more let's wait and see approach, a 3 to 5 year horizon of kind of being a little bit more mature, so to speak.
And from your perspective, as expert who was active previously in the big tech companies and currently on the investor side, how it will look like with the technologies, with the metaverse, with the blockchain, from the perspective of adoption in the mainstream, because currently we are overloaded with those topics in the little niche environment.
Sure.
When people in the mainstream will just jump into metaverse?
I think it'll be 10 years at least, if I have to put a number on it. The reality is the hardware has to catch up. A lot of this is to do with the platform and the hardware. We've been walking with these devices in our pockets for a long time, and that device and hardware has matured. And so you'll see a lot of mature companies building for those devices. And, obviously companies like Meta, Facebook, are spending a lot of time on what a device would look like, whether it's the Oculus or some other kind of AR, VR platform to access this universe, so to speak. So those need to mature. They're not in enough people's hands to kind of say we're going to see some significant businesses being built in the short term. So until that is at a stage where everyone has, I'm not saying in their pocket, but maybe in their homes or as an alternative to maybe your PC, I think it's difficult to kind of get a sense of this is really going to be mainstream. So we have to be a little bit patient with the hardware adoption before we kind of jump into the software adoption, so to speak.
So let's be patient
a
little bit. Thank you, Aman, Ghei, FINCH Capital.
Thank you very much.